Kong was the most massive we have ever seen him in Godzilla vs. Kong, towering over buildings and mountainsides all the same. But some information has been recovered, coming from the director of Godzilla vs. Kong and the next movie in the franchise, Adam Wingard, that states Kong may not be done growing just yet. In this Monsterverse Theory video, we are going to explore multiple reasons why the next time Kong shows up, he may be even larger than his size in Godzilla vs. Kong. Residents, this is Jacob. Stomp the subscribe button and bell for more videos like this, and let's get to it. But before we get to that, we have some new merch on the way this summer actually, so don't forget to use our special link in the description and join Jurassic World Alive to become eligible to get one of our new shirts coming out this year. 337 feet or 102 meters tall. That's how big Kong was when we saw him face off against Godzilla, who at this point in the timeline is nearly 400 feet tall himself. And while this size difference was hard to notice in the movie, it certainly played a part in Godzilla's eventual victory in battle. With a rematch possibly coming down the road after reports that the Monsterverse is continuing, with Adam Wingard returning to direct the sequel to Godzilla vs. Kong, the ape will need to keep growing in order to take on Godzilla or other massive foes again. And the lore actually gives us plenty of evidence that Kong will keep growing now that he is in the Hollow Earth and not stuck on Skull Island. So let's first go over Kong's growth on Skull Island, and detail how bits of written lore gives us reasoning behind Kong's mysterious growth patterns. After Kong was born, he slowly grew for decades or possibly hundreds of years before we saw him in Kong Skull Island. At the time of that movie, 1973 in the lore, Kong was around 100 feet tall. His growth was slow at first due to the amount of competition he had with the island's wildlife. With him being the same size as most of the creatures on the island during this stage of his growth, he had to fight for every day he had on the planet, which didn't allow his body to grow as quickly as it could have. It wasn't until Kong finally defeated the big skullcrawler that things on the island began to change, specifically Kong himself. With the only skullcrawler capable of killing the ape now gone, Kong was no longer hindered by the threat of something that could kill him. Just like early whales in the ocean who had to compete against creatures like that of the megalodon, but exploded in size after the extinction of their massive shark threat. Kong had no natural threats on the island anymore, so he began to grow rapidly. It took him potentially hundreds of years to reach 100 feet tall, but in a span of 50 years after the big one died, the ape had grown to over 300 feet tall. Skull Island quickly became overwhelmed by the giant ape, and in the lore it stated how Kong went from a protector of the island to the one who was actually harming it due to him outgrowing the space and killing off much of the island's ecosystem. For the last decade before Godzilla vs. Kong, however, the ape's growth had severely slowed down. His size had reached its fullest potential on the small island mass, and just like a reptile or fish who had outgrown their tanks, his health took a turn for the worse as well. And then, when the island was flooded due to Ghidorah and Camazotz, Kong was forced to live in the biodome that we've seen in the movie, an even smaller space, since the rest of the island was turning into a wet wasteland with nothing to support him. Director Adam Wingard has stated that Kong was the equivalent to a middle-aged man who was going through a midlife crisis more or less when we find him on Skull Island in Godzilla vs. Kong. He had outgrown the island physically, and the damage he caused to the island's ecosystem must have driven him a bit bonkers as well. The ape's body and mind had begun to tailspin in a negative direction, and if he would have stayed on Skull Island longer, it would have only gotten worse and maybe even killed him. Fast forward through Godzilla vs. Kong, and we now have the ape living in the immense Hollow Earth, an area likely hundreds of times larger than Skull Island, if not even more when you take into account how the place has two sides of livable space, both on the floor and the ceiling. Wingard has also stated that now in the Hollow Earth, Kong had become rejuvenated and de-aged in a way. Kong's youth was back and his body began to grow back towards peak performance. He was no longer caged in a small area, and just like with fishes and reptiles, the larger the area holding them was, the larger they would continue to grow. Now before you biologist folk get on to me, Kong is a mammal, which mammals tend to stop growing at certain points in their life. But Kong being a titan and all in a fictional universe kind of throws that all out the window, so let's move on with this theory. On top of the sheer amount of extra space Kong now had, the amount of food around the Hollow Earth for him to feast on would be plentiful. In the lore, it said how Kong had eaten most of the giant squid and other creatures he considered his normal diet on Skull Island, and was stuck mostly eating vegetation at the end of his stay there. So this massive influx of protein and whatever good nutrients the wildlife had in his new environment would stimulate the ape's growth once again. Lastly, the weird energy that flows in the Hollow Earth could always play a role in causing Kong to grow even more. Its powers are still mysterious, and we can't rule out that he will get a size boost from this source as well. So let's recap the reason why Kong may be even larger in the next movie. Number 1. The Hollow Earth is massive and he is no longer held back by a small cage. Number 2. There's going to be plenty of new abundant sources of food and nutrients. Number 3. The Hollow Earth is a mysterious, powerful place with energy sources beyond comprehension riddled throughout it. While this is just a theory and we don't pretend to claim any of this as fact, it does all make sense when you look at it from the way of a director like Adam Wingard. Bigger monsters are never a bad thing for movies, you gotta always one-up your game. And to continue the MonsterVerse story, Kong will need to get larger if he is indeed the torchbearer for the franchise at the moment. I won't say he will be larger than Godzilla in the next movie, but I would expect him to be well over 350 feet or 107 meters tall by the time we see him next in the series. But what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below. Subscribe and like this video for more theories. If you have any theories, let me know as well down in the comments. And on that note, this has been Jacob, and I will see you all in the next one.